This is our Facing History critique. We are going to have the pleasure of listening to 3 of our wonderful 9th graders talk about their projects. They've spent the last trimester working very hard, developing their ideas and creating artwork about their chosen topic, which they'll tell you about. The Facing History critique is really meant to be a discussion with the boys that we can really provide them with meaningful feedback about these difficult topics and topics that really gives us also a chance to sort of delve into some social issues that we're not necessarily always talking about every day. Facing History uses the paradigm of the bystander, the victim, the perpetrator, and the hero. So please keep that in mind when you're looking at the work and the boy is talking about their project, and then when you get to ask questions afterwards. The format will be that they will present their project and talk about it, and then after each boy presents, you can ask them questions. And I do invite you to ask questions. We try to have this be a meaningful discussion back and forth. Some things that you can talk about with them or think about questions is how do you respond personally to the issues that the boy chose. So also, how do you respond as an audience member, but you can also ask them how they have responded to that topic. And why did they portray that particular issue, and why did they portray it in that particular way? How does the visual presentation, because remember these are works of art that they're presenting to us, how does that visual presentation affect the meaning of the artwork? The materials that they chose and how they chose to put those materials together, and what that might also add to the topic. And why they chose that method of presenting their work. And also, what do you see that is the most successful about the project? Okay. Each boy started their work with an ethical question, and Ms. Exposito, who is one of their art teachers, is going to tell you, give the ethical question of the boy who is presenting, and then let that boy go ahead and present. By the way, before we even start, I just want to mention, I'm Tara Parsons, part of the art department. The other art teachers that were involved with this are Ms. Alex Exposito, right here, and Dr. Rob McCallum, who's downstairs with the other group right now. And then Winnie Barnes and Steve Cohen. Winnie Barnes is here. Steve Cohen is down in the other group. They worked with the boys, working on their topics and their writing and all of that. So it's really been a whole group effort. Anyways, okay. Alex Exposito.
Yes, so the first student who's presenting is Pablo Legorreta, and his question is it ethical to have such easy access to guns in a nation that has no way of preventing mentally challenged people from purchasing guns and other such devices?
Over the last year, I have not stopped thinking about Facing History. Around a month and a half ago, when the project was formally introduced, I came upon an interesting topic: gun control in America. I was watching a segment of Piers Morgan on CNN about how easy it is to get your hands on guns in this nation. In the middle of the program, Piers began to talk about mental illness and how it is connected to the recent shootings, including Aurora and Sandy Hook. I have delved deeply into this topic and struggled through it. Now, after many hours of intensive research, I realize that I'm in a more confusing place than where I started. So I invite you to listen to my presentation and make a judgment for yourself. Hello, I'm Pablo Legorreta, and I'm here talking to you as a concerned United States citizen. I would like to ask you a question. How many people do you believe have a serious diagnosable mental disorder in our country? Yes.
12%.
No.
20.
Ms. Barnes?
16%?
No. In fact, the number is quite astonishing. It is 57.7 million Americans, or 26.2% of the population. This mind-boggling statistic includes many disorders, but the ones that most directly affect my topic are bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, and suicidal tendencies. All these diseases have been linked to recent gun-related incidents, but generally the most violent is schizophrenia. In the United States, around 4 million adults suffer from this disease. Most are harmless, but around 40% of them have had at least one or more serious episode. Granted, this episode could vary in severity, and most are harmless, but it only takes one person to go into a shop, buy a weapon, and kill 20 people, which is what happened recently in Newtown. In our nation, only 5 to 10% of murders are committed by someone with a mental illness. But more importantly, the vast majority of all mass murders are committed by that 5 to 10%. This brings up a key question. Should the United States limit the availability of weapons to people with mental disorders? In our country, there are over 300 million weapons. That's a ton of zeros. This includes anything from the semi-automatic, military-grade AR-15 assault rifle to the common Beretta handgun. I'm simply amazed at the quantity of guns there are in our nation. This is almost one per citizen, including children, teenagers, and the elderly. As all of you certainly know, there has been a massive, controversial national debate over gun control. As of right now, there are only 4 states that require universal background checks. They are New York, Colorado, Illinois, and Oregon. And only 12 states have circumstantial background checks. Circumstantial background checks are required if you buy many guns or specialized weapons, like the AR-15 assault rifle. This means that out of 50 states, there are 34 states that do not require any background check whatsoever. Some of the lawyers in this room might say that there are laws in the United States to prevent people who shouldn't have guns from buying them. But how are they supposed to be enforced if there aren't any mandated universal background checks? Regarding mental illness, a key finding of my research is a causative relationship between mental illness and violence. I realized that not only is the prevalence of mental health and its relationship to violence an issue, but also how our society views it. David Dobbs from Wired quotes a man who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Quote, "I was diagnosed with schizophrenia just a month after Stephen Kazmierzak, quickly identified as schizophrenic, shot 6 people to death on the campus of Northern Illinois University. Undoubtedly primed by the shooting, wary, uncertain, without enough time to think, my doctoral advisor banned me from the university, suspended my graduate assistantship, and alerted all faculty, graduate students, and staff to forward all emails from me to her, and to under no circumstances respond to those emails," unquote. This stigma shows how people with mental illnesses are distanced and ostracized from society, and how not only is the mental illness driving them to kill and to buy firearms, but also the actual ostracism itself. To be able to find an answer to this question, a balance between the two has to be reached. In trying to solve this question, I began to think of many different types of solutions. First and foremost, we need to deal with gun shows. The issue with gun shows is that it is relatively easy to buy a gun at a gun show. If you have any sort of identification, including falsified documents, accompanied with the right amount of cash, you're able to buy a gun. No background checks, nothing. Another large issue is that the NRA, or National Rifle Association, has been making huge efforts in stopping background check laws from being passed by supporting important politicians who have great influence in the process. To be completely honest, I have no idea of what is a fair resolution to this enormous problem. Firstly, there's an entire amendment focused on ensuring the possession of firearms to United States citizens. Many people in the United States believe that taking away their right to bear arms is just a step towards the government controlling their entire lives. Finally, is it fair to say that all mentally ill people are violent? How can a person judge that? In my mind, there are 2 solutions to this problem. Firstly, background checks should be a non-issue. They should be universal. I'm simply amazed that we do not know who we are selling our guns to. Secondly, I believe that a system of laws, like the ones employed in Canada, should be used. Canada does not oppose gun ownership, but limits and controls gun ownership. For example, someone who's been fired from a job, has had a divorce, or has had any sort of traumatic event is banned from buying a firearm for 2 to 5 years. Now, I hope today that after you've heard my presentation, that you are less puzzled than I. I leave you with this final question. Is it ethical to have such easy access to guns in a nation that has no way of preventing the mentally ill from buying them? Thank you. I guess, art now. So I don't know if you realized, but when you were walking in, there was some music playing, and I actually wrote that. I wanted really to sort of depict what it's like to be in a shooting. Obviously, it's nowhere near as accurate as actually being in the shooting, but it's very repetitive and harsh, and yeah, so I wanted to do that with that. So here, I don't know if all of you can see, but from far away this looks just like a spider, but it's actually a brain. And what I want this to resemble is the brain resembles the mentally ill community in the United States. And this is an institution. This, I don't know if you can see, but this is a stack of $100 bills, which I made to represent the government. And these two are tubes that lodge into the institution. And it represents how institutions are right now being shut down continually. Their budgets are being cut every day. And this is, I really believe, one of the key issues with America right now. And as you can see, the brain is uprooting the institution. These are actually supposed to be roots. And yeah, so that's my art. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Chair.
I did not know that that music was yours in the beginning.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of people didn't hear it. Is it possible? Or would it be appropriate to hear it, or is it too long?
It's 3 minutes, so.
Yeah, you can play it.
It's like 2 minutes.
If you do it softly, then maybe we could take.
Yeah.
I'll lower the volume.
Then just leave it.
If we're in a classroom,
Ms. Barnes?
can you? I want to ask a clarifying question,
Yes.
if I may. The institution on top of the brain. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of institution
Yes,
you're talking about?
it is a mental institution, and recently in the United States, a lot of these mental institutions have been closed. And I think that's a great issue because a lot of the people have been just let go from the institutions that are clearly not eligible to be like in society. So that's a big problem. Any more questions? Yes, Ms. Silverman?
I really appreciate this that you brought this whole topic to light for us and that you chose this topic because it is such an important conversation going on in our country right now, and I think especially the idea of how to address those people who do suffer from mental illnesses and how to control their access to guns. I think you raised a really important question, and I really appreciate how sensitively you treated those people in your presentation.
Yeah, I actually
think it's a really worthwhile conversation to continue having because I think it's really important. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually spent a lot of time with Ms. Barnes trying to think of a politically correct way to refer to the people because in a lot of different articles there are a lot of different terms, and I just wanted to find the sort of middle ground between. Yeah, Ms. Tully?
I have two questions. One is, who's playing?
There's a program, it's called Sibelius,
Oh, okay.
and you can program it to play it as any instrument. This is actually supposed to be a duet for 2 violins, and yeah.
But my other question was,
Yes.
did you look into the laws that allow people with mental illness to refuse treatment?
To refuse treatment, I actually didn't look into those because when I first started the topic, I wanted to really look at how the laws work, but just since all over the nation, per state, they're completely different laws, it's just impossible to cover that in 15 minutes. So, yeah, I just had I couldn't cover everything.
But that, I mean, that is part of the problem.
Yeah.
I know that a part of the problem is that institutions are being shut down, but also it's that people don't have to stay if they don't want to. If they want to be on the street, they're allowed to. They can stay on the street. So.
Ms. Glow?
You brought up Canada, so I was
Yes.
curious, are there statistics before they put those laws into place, or are there statistics after? I don't know how far you went, but since you brought it up, I was curious if you had more information.
I actually did have more information, but I had to cut it for my...
Look, I'm giving you a chance to share it. Do you have any sign in the back?
No, I had my outline and everything, but it was something like they were halved. And actually in Australia, which is even more interesting, the gun ownership laws, you can't own guns in Australia anymore. And people thought that it would make crime rise just because of the black market, but it's actually the opposite. It was cut down by like 80%. So, I mean, yeah. Actually, Miss Lester.
The artwork, everything is tremendous. The delivery was eloquent and it resonated for me. And similar to what Ms. Silverman was saying, raising the question of, it seems obvious to us after all these tragedies that there should be many limitations on gun ownership. On the other hand, the way you presented it really had me thinking about, well, what next? You know, so, you know, is it really right to target, you know, if this population is primarily responsible for X, what about X?
Yeah, because there's so many different types of mental disorders.
Or it could be anything.
Yeah.
You know, if more of the crimes up on 135th Street are committed by Dominicans, does that mean we don't let them live up there? Or whatever it is, like, how do we segregate and really say it's cause and effect? You know? And where do we stop? Where do we limit it? But anyway, the artwork is fantastic. I think
Thank
it's
you.
really evocative. And the music.
Okay.
So I'm very proud of the topic you selected because it's a very important topic of our time and very controversial, and I applaud you for that. But I'm curious to know who's the hero of the story. I might see Piers Morgan as a hero, which has done an amazing job for all of us fighting this difficult topic. And so he's sort of a hero to be. There's a lot to do. And I don't know if a possible idea is that we all have to be heroes and all do our little part, because this will require monumental change that, anyway, so I don't know if you have ideas of who the hero is.
As of right now, I really don't know. I read a lot of essays and papers about this, and I just couldn't find anybody who's really being an upstander for this right now. So I guess like people who are spreading the awareness of this are.
And think about the politicians you read about who are fighting
Yes.
for this.
There are a lot of politicians who are fighting for background check laws to be passed, and I guess those are the heroes right now.
And is there anything we can do to help with the situation? I mean, would you ask any of us to be upstanders or bystanders and do something like write letters to our congressmen or congresswomen?
I mean, it's really hard to sort of change the whole Constitution, because that's really what this is like rooted in. It's really the Constitution that gives citizens the right to bear arms. So, I mean, it's really the politicians who have to kind of change their mindset. And like I said, the NRA, they're just very good at like sort of meddling with politics and having their laws be passed or not passed, depending. So, I mean, it's hard. It's hard. Yes,
I
ma'am.
didn't get to talk about your art, which is really intense.
Yeah.
The more I look at it, it's so evocative of that big black brain, which you can just see seething with, you know, troubles. And then this little institution trying to kind of be on it, but it's not really helping. And then the money and the NRA and the government sort of hooked in, but it's really, wow, I love it. Mr. Warren?
First of all, great job all around. I think it was quite an impressive job. What I wanted to know is, you've obviously done a lot of research and background reading, and I, like many of us, feel passionate about this. And one thing that anytime I've always engaged in this argument or conversation with someone who is pro-gun, I've never, in my mind, come across or heard anyone give me a good argument for why we should have access to guns. And every argument I always hear is, oh, it's our God-given right. It was written, but I've never had a logical argument presented to me. So I was wondering if you came across any argument that at least got you thinking, oh, I've never heard that presented that way.
As I was reading through like all the articles I read about, the general arguments, like you said, were like the Constitution, and they don't want the government taking over, which I really don't understand, because technology is so advanced now that we can't do anything. But really, I think those are the two main arguments. Other than that, I don't see any others.
Still not a really
Yeah.
good argument.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you.
Bravo.
Se queda